Hi, I'm Renn Butler, and it's a real honor to be able to talk with you. Some of you may have seen my presentation last month. I'm really sorry if you were one of the people who wanted to be in the class several days ago. My computer crashed, so apologies for that. So I am the director of the Grof Studies program through Ubiquity. I got my PhD in December 2022, and I really appreciate and admire the vision of Ubiquity University. And I feel like this is the cutting edge of learning models, and bringing together experts from the kinds of disciplines that people want to study. So I will share my screen. Uh, I'm going to talk today about Stan Grof's concept of the cosmic game. Just maximize this here. Let's take a moment. This, hey, that should do it. Okay, the cosmic game. So Stan talks about this in Way of the Psychonaut, Volume 2, which was the official book for this presentation, but he elaborates in more depth the same subject in his book, The Cosmic Game, and most of what I'm presenting is from that book. This is his only book that looks at the insights from his consciousness research with breathwork and psychedelic-assisted therapy from the point of view of the cosmic creative principle itself. What are the possible motives of the divine for creating the world, for example? And then he dovetails his insights and research with the writings of the great mystical traditions. So I consider this book, The Cosmic Game, to be the book of the millennium. So if you want to sit down and have a good read sometime, 1998. So before I do, I am teaching a 22-week course in archetypal and holotropic astrology starting in the middle of September. And there's the link. If you're interested, it does count for 5 credits to the Grof Studies program, or for the Grof Studies program, elective credits. And then 2 other courses, a 4-week course in Grof Studies offered next September. And then in the spring, again, we'll do our holotropic worldview course. And then there's an additional 4 slideshows that are come with those courses. And then we're doing a 2-part retreat in Greece on the island of Aegina, October 13th to the 20th, and then the 20th to the 23rd, we're hoping to be in Eleusis itself and do another breathwork session there. There'll be Grof breathwork and archetypal astrology in both of those, and then visits to sacred sites and excursions, including Delphi and Mycenae and amazing sites on the island of Aegina. So this is not quite ready, but if you're interested, you could get your name in. We think it will fill quite fast, but we're really looking forward to these Greek retreats. Okay, toward a grand vision. So Stan writes, people who experience holotropic states and integrate them effectively do not develop idiosyncratic delusional worldviews representing disjointed distortions of objective reality. Rather, they discover various partial aspects of a grand vision of a universe that is created and permeated by superior cosmic intelligence. And when the more sessions people do, if they're done in a responsible way and they're integrated into their life, the more that this grand vision opens up to them. And everyone who reaches that state has the same basic vision of what the universe is. This seems to be an actual higher perception of the universe the cosmic creative principle that people gain access to. We have access to the entire field of cosmic consciousness. Stan writes that in holotropic states, we can experience the consciousness of the entire universe or any subset within that whole. Everything in the multi-cosmos has a subjective component, and that's what we can access through our own psyches. So the boundaries between the individual human psyche and the rest of the cosmos are ultimately arbitrary and can be transcended. Each of us is commensurate with the totality of existence. The ensouled universe. Following powerful transpersonal experiences, our worldview typically expands to include some elements of the cosmologies of various native peoples and ancient cultures. Authentic experiences of conscious identification with animals, plants, and even inorganic materials and processes like photosynthesis or metamorphosis make it easy to understand the beliefs of animistic cultures that see the entire universe as being ensouled. From their perspective, not only all the animals, but also the trees, the rivers, the mountains, the sun, the moon, and the stars appear to be sentient beings. So the idea of archetypes is so fundamental in the new cosmology, which Stan has one idea for a name of the holotropic worldview. I like that because it has a vector associated with it, moving toward wholeness. Archetypes are a very deep layer of the perennial philosophy, this sort of from the unified field of consciousness down to the level of individual objects, animals, plants, humans, and so on. Archetypes are pretty close to the absolute consciousness, but they're not the final source, the ultimate source of our experience. And Joseph Campbell wrote that archetype deities should be transparent to the transcendent. They should function as a bridge to the divine source, but not be confused with it. In other words, the different gods and goddesses. When we are involved in systematic self-exploration, it is important to avoid the pitfall of making a particular deity opaque and seeing it as the ultimate cosmic source rather than a window into the absolute. To think that our particular god or goddess from our particular time and place in history is the final source, or all there is, this kind of dangerous kind of monotheism. Mistaking a specific archetypal image for the ultimate source of creation leads to idolatry, a divisive and dangerous mistake widespread in the histories of religions and cultures. It might unite the people who share the same belief, but sets this group against others who have chosen a different representation of the divine. They might then try to convert others or conquer and eliminate them. By contrast, genuine religion is universal, all-inclusive, and all-encompassing. It has to transcend specific culture-bound archetypal images and focus on the ultimate source of all forms. And this would essentially be the absolute consciousness, or the universal mind. Another sort of ultimate experience of that unitive field of consciousness could be called the supercosmic or metacosmic void, which is commensurate with Ervin Laszlo's idea of the psi or quantum field or akashic field or holo field. I really like his term holo field for that. The supreme cosmic principle can be experienced in two different ways. Sometimes all personal boundaries dissolve and we completely merge with the divine source, becoming one with it. Other times we maintain the sense of separate identity, assuming the role of an astonished observer who is witnessing, as if from the outside, the mysterium tremendum of existence. Or like some mystics, we might feel the ecstasy of an enraptured lover experiencing the encounter with the beloved. And this principle holds true with many transpersonal experiences. We can encounter something, let's say, an archetype, or we can become it and merge with it and then give it a voice, give it expression. This metaphysical vacuum, pregnant with potential for everything there is, appears to be the cradle of all being, the ultimate source of existence. The creation of all phenomenal worlds is then the realization and concretization of its pre-existing potentialities. And again, Laszlo's Akashic field or holo field. And we read Science in the Akashic Field based on Georgie's recommendation. I asked her which one she'd recommend in our course, the holotropic worldview, and people really enjoyed it a lot. He's connected all the important dots in a way that no one else has done up to this point. So when we reach experiential identification with absolute consciousness, we realize that our own being is ultimately commensurate with the entire cosmic network of existence. The recognition of our own divine nature, our identity with the cosmic source, is the most important discovery we can make during the process of deep self-exploration. This is the essence of the famous statement found in the ancient Indian scriptures, the Upanishads, Tat Tvam Asi, thou art that, you are of divine nature, or you are Godhead. In Hinduism, Atman, the individual consciousness, and Brahman, the universal consciousness, are one. The followers of Siddha Yoga hear in many variations the basic tenet of their school: God dwells within you as you. In Buddhist scriptures, we can read, look within, you are the Buddha. In the Confucian tradition, we are told that heaven, earth, and human are one body. The same message can be found in the words of Jesus Christ: Father, you and I are one. The kingdom of God is within you as well. It's from John. In Buddhist texts, the awareness of the essential emptiness of all forms and the ensuing realization that there are no separate selves is referred to as anatta, literally no self. Jack Kornfield, a psychologist and Vipassana meditation Buddhist teacher, describes his first encounter with the concept of anatta during his meeting with the late Tibetan spiritual teacher Kalu Rinpoche. And of course, Jack Kornfield is a great friend of Stan Grof for many years. They did a lot of workshops together every year at Joshua Tree, meditation and breath work. Trying to get as much as possible from his encounter with this remarkable human being, Jack asked him with the eagerness of a zealous beginner, please, could you describe for me in a few sentences the very essence of the Buddhist teachings? Kalu Rinpoche replied, I could do it, but you would not believe me, and it would take you many years to understand what I mean. Jack politely insisted, please, can you tell me anyway? I would like to know. Kalu Rinpoche's answer was brief and succinct. You do not really exist. So the realization that all the phenomenal worlds, including our material plane, are virtual realities created by absolute consciousness leads to some very interesting questions. The merging and union with the cosmic creative principle, as it was described in the previous chapter, is certainly an extraordinary and very desirable experience from the point of view of an individual human being. Many spiritual traditions consider reaching this state to be the ultimate goal of the spiritual quest. Those who actually attain the union with the universal mind realize that the situation is much more complicated. See, this is the ascending vector, which is such an important part of the spiritual quest, to transcend the individual ego consciousness and awaken back into the universal consciousness. So they discover that what they once considered to be the goal of the spiritual journey is also the source of creation. It becomes clear to them that in order to create the phenomenal worlds, the divine has to abandon its original state of pristine, undifferentiated unity. Considering how fantastic the experience of identification with absolute consciousness is from the human perspective, it seems strange that the creative principle should seek an alternative, or at least a complement, to a simple experience of itself. This naturally leads to the question about the nature of the forces that compel absolute consciousness to relinquish its primordial state and to engage in the process of creating experiential realities like the world we live in. What could possibly motivate the divine to seek separation, pain, struggle, incompleteness, and impermanence? In short, precisely the states from which we are trying to escape when we embark on the spiritual journey. This is a very good question. The impulse to create is often described as an elemental force that reflects the unimaginable inner richness and abundance of the divine. The creative cosmic source is so immense and overflowing with limitless possibilities that it cannot contain itself and has to express its full hidden potential. People who have this experience realize that the sun is the most immediate expression of the divine that we can experience in the material world, and they understand why some cultures worship the sun as God, though this metaphor of the sun with the divine principle falls short in certain ways, such as the quality of meaning associated with the divine consciousness and the sense of purpose. Additional important elements or dimensions of the creative process that are often emphasized are the playfulness, self-delectation, and cosmic humor of the creator. These are elements that have best been described in ancient Hindu texts that talk about the universe and existence as Leela, or divine play. According to this view, creation is an intricate, infinitely complex cosmic game that the Godhead, Brahman, creates from himself or herself, and within himself, herself. He, she is the playwright who conceived the game, as well as its producer, director, and also the actors who play the countless myriads of the roles involved. This cosmic game of games is played in many dimensions, on many levels, and on unimaginable scales. Creation can also be viewed as a colossal experiment that expresses the immense curiosity of absolute consciousness, a passion that is analogous to the infatuation of a scientist who dedicates his or herself to exploration and research. However, the cosmic experiment is naturally infinitely more complex than anything that the collective effort of all the scientists of the world could possibly conceive of. All the fascinating discoveries of science that extend far into the micro world and into the remote regions of the universe just barely scratch the surface of the unfathomable enigma of existence. A question that repeatedly emerges in non-ordinary states is the degree of control that the divine has in the process of creation. And Stan has posited this idea of the kaleidoscope universe. So sometimes it appears that absolute consciousness is fully in charge of creation in its totality and in all its details. In this case, any surprises in the cosmic game occur only to individual protagonists. Occasionally, however, people experiencing holotropic states become aware of a significant alternative to this scenario. They see that it might be possible that only the basic parameters of creation are clearly defined, but the final outcome in detail remains unpredictable even for the divine. This latter model of the cosmic game can be compared to a kaleidoscope or a chess game. Things are set, the basic patterns, and then the things begin to move and there's a possibility of surprise. And that's how we see archetypal astrology. The basic vectors, like Mars, the universe's impulse toward action and assertion, Venus, its impulses toward love, beauty, harmony, are set in motion in the creation of a cosmos, but the divine doesn't know exactly how they will interplay in their specific forms. And that's the most that astrologers can do, as Rick Tarnas says, is we can make archetypal predictions. Astrology is archetypally predictive, not concretely predictive. So although the intelligence of absolute consciousness is immense, it is conceivable that the unfolding of the cosmic drama can be beyond its control and can provide genuine surprises. Some people who have experienced insights into the motives for creation also emphasize its aesthetic side. When the doors of perception are cleansed, to use Blake's expression, it is difficult to miss the astonishing beauty of creation. From this perspective, the universe we live in and all the experiential realities in other dimensions also appear to be ultimate works of art, and the impulse to create them can be likened to the inspiration and creative passion of a supreme artist. Other motive, other motives might seem unusual to some seekers, but we can experience these directly in holotropic states. They do not reflect overflowing abundance, richness, self-sufficiency, and mastery of the cosmic creative principle, but a certain sense of deficiency, need, or want. For example, it is possible to discover that in spite of the immensity and perfection of its state of being, absolute consciousness realizes that it is alone. This loneliness finds its expression in an abysmal yearning for partnership, communication, and sharing, a kind of divine longing. The most powerful force behind creation is then described as the need of the creative principle to give and receive love. It's possible to feel this sorrow directly. I remember crying, every week for more than a year, and I felt like I was experiencing this loneliness of the divine. And not long after that, my sessions began to move me much closer to the absolute consciousness for that cycle. And I had many transpersonal openings, was able to experience various deities and archetypes, and even reach the metacosmic void several times. So when we reach those kinds of experiences, this is a major breakthrough for us. So spirit has a profound desire to experience what is opposite and contrary to its own nature. It wants to explore all the qualities that in its pristine nature it does not have, and to become everything that it is not. Being eternal, infinite, unlimited, and ethereal, it longs for the ephemeral, impermanent, limited by time and space, solid and corporeal. This is just truly a great quote. Excuse me. People can also experience the universe as the goddess pouring herself into her creation. And remember, at this level of experience, there is no gender. The cosmic creative principle is experienced as both feminine and masculine. And I believe that this reaching these states is one of the deeper motives of all human beings. So monotony is another motive that the mystics can sometimes experience for why the divine creates the world. So however immense and glorious the experience of the divine might appear from the human perspective, for the divine it is always the same, and in that sense monotonous. Creation can then be seen as a titanic effort expressing a transcendental longing for change, action, movement, drama, and surprise. The countless experiential realities in many different dimensions and on many different levels offer infinite number of opportunities for adventures in consciousness and divine self-entertainment. The extreme forms of descriptions portraying creation as an act aimed at overcoming the monotony of undifferentiated absolute consciousness even refer to cosmic boredom. This again echoes passages from the medieval Kabbalistic texts that one of the reasons God created the universe was to overcome boredom. We can experience in sessions this, as I said, powerful yearning to transcend our limited ego consciousness and reawaken into the universal field of the infinite and eternal divine field, which is very different than us who are finite and temporary. And so the infinite and eternal, unchanging divine consciousness gives us everything that we are missing, transcends our fear of death. But we can also sometimes in sessions cross through that line and feel like we're looking back at creation and our life from the divine side. And from that point of view, we realize that the divine has a completely different set of problems. The problem and challenge for it is how to bury itself into matter in new and unique ways to maximize its enjoyment. And it can be quite an ironic moment when we get there, and it can even be anticlimactic very briefly for a few seconds when we realize, oh, you're lonely or you're bored, and then things open up and we just realize what an incredibly satisfying and most satisfactory relationship the divine has with all the parts, all the myriad units of consciousness that it creates. I had a session this past year where I experienced the souls like children in a way, lining up for incarnation like children would line up for a carnival ride, and they couldn't wait, to get back in line to have another incarnation. And it didn't matter how much suffering was involved in that incarnation. It was like a thrilling ride. And then at the end, after death, they reawaken back into the universal field. And it was immensely entertaining and exciting. The creation of various phenomenal worlds also makes it possible for absolute consciousness to escape from the intolerable eternal here and now into the comforting and predictable experience of linear time, limited space, and impermanence. This would then be the polar opposite and negative mirror image of the human fear of death and impermanence that underlies our deep craving for immortality and transcendence. For people who have had this experience, the threat of extinction of consciousness can be permanently replaced by the awareness that ultimately there is no way out of consciousness. So then Stan talks about how the divine splits itself into the units of consciousness in the process of involution. The universal mind engages in a creative play that involves complicated sequences of divisions, fragmentations, and differentiations. This finally results in experiential worlds that contain countless separate entities that are endowed with specific forms of consciousness and possess selective self-awareness. So the divine does not create something outside of itself, but by transformations within the field of its own being. The second important element in the process of creation is a unique form of partitioning or of isolating cosmic screenworks through which the filial conscious entities progressively and increasingly lose contact with their original source and the awareness of their pristine, unified divine nature. They also develop a sense of individual identity and absolute separateness from each other. In the final stages of this process, intangible but relatively impermeable screens exist between these split-off units and also between each of them and the original undifferentiated pool of absolute consciousness. It is important to emphasize, though, that this sense of separation is purely subjective and ultimately illusory. On a deeper level, the undivided and undifferentiated unity continues to underlie all of creation. I just took a break. We're taking care of my dad here in Alberta, northwest of Edmonton, near a town, Onaway, where I grew up. And we just had to do some errands. So My dad was an English professor at the University of Alberta, and behind you is a tiny fraction of his massive collection of books. Okie doke. Stop this ready again. There. Okay, so this is why many people borrow the terminology from psychology and compare this process with such mechanisms as forgetting, repression, or dissociation. The taboo against knowing who you are, as Alan Watts called it, and this is why the process of the inner archaeological quest below a certain level of discovery, of depth, automatically turns into a spiritual opening process, and that's usually described as awakening or realization. The separate units of consciousness remain on another level essentially identical with their source and with each other, and essential information about each of them is distributed in the entire cosmic field, and in much the same way as a hologram. And Stan talks about that metaphor in more depth, is why each of us has access to the subjective components of every part of the universe. So a fantastic adventure in consciousness, which the Hindu scriptures refer to as Leela, and the product of a fundamental cosmic illusion called Maya. The situation of an actor very closely resembles the role each of us plays in the cosmic drama. While on stage and performing a role, good actors can to a great extent lose contact with their real identities and become the characters they represent, like Jim Carrey in that movie about Andy Kaufman, be one example. And you probably, some of you will recognize this shot from Outlander series. So using the analogy with the movie, which is a modern technological version of a magic show, the intention of the movie makers is to create a reasonable facsimile, a make-believe version of material reality. It is easy for the spectators to imagine the scenes unfolding on the screen represent real events in the material world. And people can respond as emotionally as if it was real. This happens in spite of the fact that they know intellectually that what they are watching is nothing but a play of electromagnetic waves of different frequencies within a single undivided field of light. Just making sure I'm recording here, which I am. And that looks like it's freaking good. So he's talking about this metaphor of movies for the cosmic game. If we investigate further, we'll see that the film started as an idea in somebody's mind, and you know, Plato's metaphor of the cave is interesting here. The sense that spiritual awakening is, instead of seeing the shadow play on the wall, we turn around and we're able to see the archetypal realm, which is the source of, or the divine realm, which is the source of the shadows that we see on the wall. So there's an ingenious range of opportunities for dissolution of boundaries and fusion that mediate experiential return to the source. And so there's these two vectors, I think I've got that in the next slide. Evolution, which is the movement back toward the source, and involution, which is the source incarnating itself into the material world. And the holotropic is the word that Stan uses to describe this involution, moving toward matter. Hylos. Tropane means moving toward. That's and then the holotropic is the ascending aspect of the cosmic process. In endless cycles of creation, preservation, and destruction, absolute consciousness overcomes the feelings of monotony and transcendental boredom. The temporary negation and loss of its pristine state alternates with episodes of its rediscovery and reclaiming. The periods that are full of agony, anguish, and despair are followed by episodes of bliss and ecstatic rapture. When the original undifferentiated consciousness is regained after it was temporarily lost, it is experienced as exciting, surprising, fresh, and new. And this is the moment in sessions when the transition at the perinatal level from BPM 2 or BPM 3 to BPM 4, which is rebirth and awakening. It's connected with the archetype of Uranus, this sudden, dramatic opening of consciousness. The existence of agony gives a new dimension to the experience of ecstasy. The knowledge of darkness enhances the appreciation of light, and the extent of enlightenment is directly proportionate to the depth of previous ignorance. All the roles in the cosmic drama, as we have seen, have ultimately one protagonist, absolute consciousness. In modern times, this found a beautiful artistic expression in the poem Please Call Me by My True Names by Thich Nhat Hanh. So the problem of good and evil. Many people who have come close to death talk about their encounters with the being of light and describe that in its presence, they subjected their lives to merciless reckoning. This strong propensity of the human psyche for moral self-evaluation is reflected in scenes of divine judgment in eschatological mythologies of many different cultures. Sort of a day of judgment. In more psychological language, as our process of self-exploration deepens, we can discover within ourselves highly problematic emotions and impulses that we were previously completely unaware of. Dark and destructive aspects of our unconscious psyche that Jung referred to as the shadow. Some of these dark elements represent our reactions to painful aspects of our history, particularly traumas in infancy and childhood. Activation of aggression, for example. In addition, powerful destructive potential seems to be associated with the perinatal level of our psyche, the domain of the unconscious that is related to the trauma of birth. In view of these disclosures, it becomes clear that the menacing doubles, in such works of art as The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, The Picture of Dorian Gray, or William Wilson, do not represent fictitious literary characters, but the shadow aspects of an average human personality. The hours of painful and life-threatening experiences associated with the passage through the birth canal naturally provoke a corresponding violent response in the fetus, desire to fight back, scream, or leave the situation, but it cannot do any of those things because of the constricting birth canal. And all of those feelings, the rage, the desire to survive, are fed and jammed back into its musculature and the cells of its body and psyche. This results in a repository of aggressive tendencies that we harbor in our unconscious for the rest of our life, unless we make special effort to confront them and transform them. And this is the problem that comes out in mass movements. If enough people are under this kind of stress, and then a demagogue comes along, or an evil dictator like a Hitler or a Stalin, they can mobilize people to aim their aggression at some external target, and then people have a chance to kind of act out those emotions. And this is one of the major dangers that we face in this evolutionary juncture that we're in. When the process of self-exploration moves to the transpersonal level, serious ethical questions are typically raised about humanity as a whole, about the entire species of Homo sapiens. Transpersonal experiences often portray dramatic historical scenes or even offer a comprehensive panoramic review of history. Such sequences bring powerful evidence that unbridled violence and insatiable greed have always been extremely powerful driving forces in human life. This brings the question about the nature of human beings and the proportion of good and evil in the human species. Now, Fromm talked about the aggression in the psyche that we don't need to survive, the extra aggression, as malignant aggression. And greed and aggression are the two biggest problems facing our species. Both of these have very powerful perinatal sources, not the only sources, but very powerful ones. Is the very phenomenon of life flawed in some fundamental way? In holotropic states, these questions can emerge with agonizing urgency and intensity. But this is a very beneficial place to be in our process, because after these kind of questions often comes insight and perspective into solutions, and we get a sense of how we can contribute and be part of the solution. So, divine roots of evil. Is there one creative source that transcends polarities and is responsible for both good and evil? Or is the universe a battlefield where two cosmic forces, one essentially good and the other evil, engage in a universal combat in the way it has been portrayed in Zoroastrianism, Manichaeism, and Christianity? If so, which of these is more powerful and will ultimately prevail? If God is good and just, omniscient and omnipotent, as we are told by mainstream Christianity, how do we explain the amount of evil in the world? Millions of children are killed in a bestial way or die of starvation, cancer, and infectious diseases. In holotropic states of consciousness, fundamental ethical questions concerning the nature and origin of evil, the reason for its existence, and its role in the fabric of creation emerge spontaneously and with great urgency. The problem of the morality of the creative principle that is directly responsible for all the suffering and horrors of existence, or that permits and tolerates evil, at least, is truly a formidable one. This is a very challenging part of our inner archaeological quest and our philosophical and spiritual quest, these great shadow scenes, the two parts of Gollum, Smeagol, in mainly at the Two Towers, I believe, but maybe also the Return of the King, Two Towers. So everything that emerges has to be counterbalanced by its opposite. Polarities are absolutely indispensable. One of the motives for creation seems to be the need of the creative principle to get to know itself. Not expressing the full range of this potential would mean incomplete self-knowledge. If the divine is the ultimate artist, experimenter, and explorer, it would compromise the richness of the creation to leave out some significant options. The existence of the shadow enhances its light aspects by providing contrast and gives extraordinary richness and depth to the universal drama. This conflict between good and evil is an inexhaustible source of inspiration for fascinating stories and adventures in consciousness. A disciple once asked Sri Ramakrishna, "Swamiji, why is evil in the world?" After a short deliberation, Ramakrishna replied succinctly, "To thicken the plot." Now, a widely used manual for successful screenplay writing stresses the importance of tension, conflict, and drama as necessary prerequisites for a successful movie. It actually specifically warns that portraying life in a happy village would guarantee a certain flop and box office disaster. The filmmakers, who have a free choice to select any themes for their movies, do not usually choose sweet, uneventful stories with a happy ending. They typically include suspense, danger, difficulties, serious emotional conflicts, sex, violence, and evil. And of course, the creators of movies themselves are significantly influenced by the taste and demands of the audiences. To the extent to which God created humans according to his/her image, as we are told, it should not be surprising that cosmic creation follows the same principles that govern creative activity and entertainment in our world. I often think about this quote, and I'm really honored to be sharing some of these great selections from Stan's book. Really amazing. Good and evil as separate entities come into existence and manifest in the initial stages of creation when the dark and the light aspect of the divine emerge from the undifferentiated matrix of the void and absolute consciousness. Its first duality. The creation of the dark, or the shadow, creates a vector that moves away from consciousness and from bliss and from knowledge of the divine. And then the divine can, by allowing it to thrive and to sort of unfold in certain ways, or also to limit it and deflect it and contain it, can basically create whatever pixelated grand picture of the adventure that it is creating. So it has something pulling away from the divine, and then the divine can allow that to reel away, or it can draw it back toward the light in whatever combination it wants. The evil demiurgic principle, the negative mirror image of Satchitananda consciousness, existence, consciousness, bliss mentioned earlier, can be experienced in a purely abstract form in sessions or as a more or less concrete manifestation. Some people describe it as cosmic shadow, an immense field of ominous energy endowed with consciousness, intelligence, destructive potential, and monstrous determination to cause chaos, suffering, and disaster. Others experience it as an anthropomorphic figure of immense proportions representing the all-pervading universal evil, or the dark god. The encounter with the shadow side of existence can also take a more culture-bound form of specific deities, as exemplified by Satan, Lucifer, Ahriman, Hades, Lilith, Moloch, Kali, or Coatlicue. And it's very beneficial to face this in sessions. This reduces or eliminates the effects of these demonic archetypes in our lives. The separating power of evil. So its function. They saw that this principle is intricately woven into the fabric of existence, and that it permeates in increasingly concrete forms all levels of creation. And it's one of the most important elements of it is it makes people feel separate from each other and from the cosmic source. And this would correspond to the archetype Saturn, the boundaries, divisions, the partitioning, screen work, self-forgetting during incarnation. So in all situations that involve these elements of suffering, the creative principle is playing a complicated game with itself. The infected patient is not different from the bacterial agents that invaded her and caused the disease, or from the doctor who applies the antibiotic to stop the infection. A complicated game with itself. That is what is happening in the experience of incarnation. None of these are ultimately real in the sense we usually think about them. When we are watching a movie, what we see as separate protagonists are actually various aspects of one and the same undivided field of light. And it's amazing. The moment of liberation in the Great Truman Show, which is a very fun and accessible, bright, warm movie, but deeply profound movie, very Campbellian and cosmic game, exploring in its nature. The reason we decide to interpret the play of light and sound as a real story is that we are interested in the experience that results from such a strategy. We make a voluntary choice to go to the movie theater and agree to pay the entrance fee because we actively seek the experiences involved. And while we decide to react to the situation as if it were real, on another level, we are aware that the characters are fictional and that the protagonists are actors who volunteered to participate. And they didn't actually die. And so we incarnate because we are attracted by these experiences, as I mentioned. We can awaken from this dream. Nobody is killed or dies. Everyone assumes their deeper identity as the divine consciousness after death. These are the two stars of Psycho, Anthony Perkins and forgotten her name. So very interesting. So transcendental experiences actually engender reverence toward all sentient beings and responsible engagement in life. Our compassion does not require objects that have material substance. It can just as easily be addressed to sentient beings who are units of consciousness. This actually increases our compassion. We can reduce the amount of aggression in our psyches by full surrender and expression of those volcanic energies and emotions in our sessions. This leads to an increase of tolerance. And we can also, in transpersonal experiences, identify with various aspects of the creation, leading to deep reverence for life and empathy with all sentient beings. And seeing the emptiness of forms reduces our proclivity to immoral and antisocial behavior and teaches us love and compassion. What Stan calls intrinsic human values. When the arrow of suffering is removed, we automatically feel more loving, more tolerant, more kind and compassionate, and desire to be part of the solution in some way. And it frees up a lot of physical vitality as well. We realize we are an integral part of creation. By hurting ourselves, we'd be hurting ourselves. We also become aware of the law of karma, experiential repercussions of harmful behaviors, even those that escape societal retributions. And in another book, he talks about acting with utmost seriousness. We really don't want to hurt anyone in this world. And even though we know it's ultimately a cosmic game, that leads to more seriousness. It doesn't mean we can't have a sense of humor and laugh, but we're aware of the consequences of our actions at all times. This is very important. While we cannot avoid suffering, we can have a certain influence on its timing and the form it takes. When we confront the dark side of existence in a focused and condensed form in deliberately planned sessions like psychedelic-assisted therapy sessions or Grof breathwork sessions, we can significantly reduce its various manifestations in our everyday life. So if we want to improve the situation in the world and reduce the influence of evil elements on our everyday affairs, we have to find less destructive and less dangerous forms of expression for those archetypal forces. We have to create appropriate contexts that make it possible to honor these archetypal forces and to offer them alternative outlets that enhance instead of destroy life. We can't just rise above the shadow side or pray it away or do good deeds that will somehow make it go away. The most effective way is to go into these holotropic states on a semi-regular basis and surrender and just allow any of the shadow material that wants to come out to come forth, to give it a voice. And that consumes it from our psyche. releases it from our psyche. And then those negative forces go back to the divine field, or transform back into the divine. Facing birth and death automatically opens mystical dimensions of the psyche. Perinatal experiences, in spite of their violent and painful nature, they can seem quite intense at times. They are radical and drastic, but loving attempts to liberate us spiritually by demolishing the prison of our false identity. We are not being annihilated in these ego death sessions, but birth to a higher reality where we reconnect with our true nature. Christopher Bache suggests that perinatal experiences might play an important role in the healing of the traumatic past of the human species. Is it not possible, he asked, that the memory of the violence and insatiable greed that is woven into the fabric of human history causes disturbance in the collective unconscious that contaminate the whole species, present experience? Why could not the healing impact reach beyond the individual person? Is it not conceivable that by experiencing the pain that countless generations of people inflicted on each other in the course of human history, we are actually clearing the collective unconscious and contributing to a better planetary future? We have reached a level of technological development where we now need to turn some of our attention back to the past of our species and to catch up emotionally to our Promethean advance, as Rick Tarnas describes it. So incarnation and birth represent separation and alienation from our true nature, which is absolute consciousness. So the suffering in the birth canal, the choking, sometimes babies are brought to the edge of death for many hours. Positive experiences in the womb and after birth, on the other hand, are the closest contacts with the divine that we can experience during our embryonal life or in infancy. The good womb and good breast thus represent experiential bridges to the transcendental level. Conversely, negative and painful experiences that we encounter in the intrauterine period, like toxic womb memories during birth, and in the early postnatal period, traumas in infancy, send us deeper into the state of alienation from the divine source. When our prenatal and early postnatal experiences are predominantly positive, we tend to maintain throughout our life a natural connection with the cosmic source. People are just naturally happy. That's the goal of self-exploration and psychotherapy, to get to the place that some people already are, who have not been damaged. We can sense the divine dimension in nature and in the cosmos, and are able to enjoy to a great degree the incarnate existence. Conversely, when our early development was just a series of continuing traumas, the loss of connection with the spiritual source can be so complete that our existence in the material world is a painful ordeal full of emotional torment. Now, a little word about spiritual bypass. Sometimes an extremely severe trauma can result in a situation where consciousness splits from the body and is catapulted into the transpersonal realm. This can establish an escape route that is regularly used as a defense mechanism in later difficult life situations. This form of spiritual connection can help to protect us from excessive pain, but it does not enhance the quality of life, since this mechanism is not well integrated with the rest of the personality. So just some thoughts on reincarnation. This was it's not a part of modern Christianity, but it did exist among the early Christians, and most human groups have believed in reincarnation. It was part of Gnostic Christianity, known from the Nag Hammadi scrolls. And in one of the Gnostic texts, Jesus teaches his disciples how failures in one life are transferred to another. And I'll let people come back and read this, but how for various reasons, some of the early fathers of the Christian church decided to expunge the understanding of reincarnation from the canon. And then even Ian Stevenson's work on reincarnation, very interesting. Stan also talks about near-death experiences, veridical out-of-body experiences where people can see things that they couldn't have possibly seen while they were, clinically dead. And even congenitally blind people can sometimes see things in these near-death experiences. So these are very interesting, what's called anomalous phenomena that suggests consciousness does not originate in the brain, but is spread through the field of existence. So past life karmic experiences can sometimes provide illuminating insights into incomprehensible and puzzling aspects of our everyday existence. So it says that there's only one being that has true existence, the creative principle itself. Since the divisions and boundaries in the universe are illusory and arbitrary, only Brahman really incarnates. All the protagonists in the divine play are different aspects of this one. To see our past life experience as our lives requires perception of the karmic players still as separate individuals and reflects ignorance concerning the fundamental unity of everything. Awareness of past lives, and these are authentic experiences that can be very healing and can sometimes be verified with historical details. And they subjectively feel very convincing and authentic. They represent an expansion of time, but they still maintain the constriction of space, the sense that one soul incarnates successively and that's separated from all the other souls. Another way of seeing past life experiences is at the time of death, the separate individual dissolves in the oversoul, leaving a mosaic of unassimilated difficult experiences. These then become assigned to the life of other incarnated beings in a process that can be compared to dealing a hand of cards in a card game. Even spatial boundaries can be seen as ultimately illusory and can be dissolved in more deep inner work. We can reach a level where there are no more separate individuals. The existence of discrete characters is a necessary prerequisite for any karmic interaction, right? At this point, we identify with the unified field of cosmic creative energy. From this perspective, the past life dramas represent just another level of illusion, the play of Maya. So moving on, one of the important ploys that help to create the illusion of an ordinary material reality is the existence of the trivial and ugly. Yeah. If we were all radiant ethereal beings drawing our life energy directly from the sun and living in a world where all the landscapes would look like the Himalayas, the Grand Canyon, and unspoiled Pacific Islands, it would be too obvious to us that we are part of a divine reality. Similarly, if all the buildings in our world look like Alhambra, the Taj Mahal, Xanadu, or the cathedral in Chartres, and we were surrounded by Michelangelo's sculptures and listened to Beethoven's or Bach's music, the divine nature of our world would be easily discernible. He's talking about how the divine makes the world so real that we believe that it is real, and that maybe even that this is all there is for an atheist. And this is one of the ways, the existence of the trivial and the ugly. The fact that we have physical bodies with all their secretions, excretions, odors, imperfections, and pathologies, as well as a gastrointestinal system with its repulsive contents, certainly effectively obscures and confuses the issue of our divinity. Various physiological functions like vomiting, burping, passing gas, defecating, and urinating, together with the final decomposition of the human body, further complicate the picture. Similarly, the existence of unattractive natural scenes, junkyards, polluted industrial areas, foul-smelling toilets with obscene graffiti, urban ghettos, and millions of funky houses make it very difficult to realize that our life is a divine play. The existence of evil and the fact that the very nature of life is predatory, by eating, everyone is always eating either animals or plants, makes this task almost impossible for an average person. Isn't this amazing writing? I just love the way he writes. It is certainly easier to associate divinity with beauty than with ugliness. However, in a larger context, including ugliness into the universal scheme makes the spectrum of existence fuller and richer and helps to disguise the divine nature of creation. The image of the hideous can be executed with great perfection, and to be able to do it constitutes an interesting challenge for the divine. When we realize that the complex nature of cosmic consciousness includes, among other things, certain characteristics that we find on our level reflected in artists and scientists, the tendency to explore the entire spectrum of possibilities, including the ugly and disgusting, suddenly does not seem very surprising. One of the important tasks on the spiritual journey is to be able to see the divine not only in the extraordinary and ordinary, but also in the lowly and ugly. Everything is equally divine. And this is a beautiful, amazing quote here. According to our usual criteria, Albert Einstein is a genius who certainly towers high above his fellow humans, let alone above a primate like a chimpanzee. I believe I have an ape here rather than a chimpanzee. However, from a cosmic perspective, there is no hierarchical difference between Einstein and an ape, since they are both perfect specimens of what they were intended to be. Within a Shakespeare play, a king is certainly superior to his court jester. However, the status of Laurence Olivier as an actor does not oscillate depending on which of them he plays, as long as he delivers a perfect performance. Similarly, Einstein is God impeccably impersonating Albert Einstein, and a chimpanzee is God playing perfectly the role of a chimpanzee. Isn't that amazing? So I'll just go a little bit faster through here. The three poisons of Tibetan Buddhism. There seems to be general agreement that the remedy for the existential malaise that besets humanity is to turn inside, look for the answers in our own psyche, and undergo a deep psychospiritual transformation. And greed, aggression, and ignorance are the three poisons of Tibetan Buddhism. Let's talk about aggression again for a minute. Animals exhibit aggression when they are hungry, defend their territory, or compete for sex. But the violence exhibited by humans has no parallels in the animal kingdom. And there are very strong perinatal sources, as I mentioned, but also from the transpersonal domain of various wrathful deities. The apocalypse, the twilight of the gods, archetypal scenes, the additional repositories of aggression that we can clear out of our psyches include past life memories, phylogenetic matrices reflecting our animal past. We can identify with hunting or fighting animal species, also astronomical phenomena such as the explosions of black holes. And in deep experiential work that reaches to the perinatal and transpersonal levels, enormous amounts of aggression can be safely expressed, worked through, and transformed in a relatively short time. It's important to express it, to yell, to make fists, to pound the mat, to allow these energies to come forth. Aggression is not something that reflects our true nature, but rather is a screen that separates us from it. Our true nature is divine, not bestial. The task of transforming humanity from a greedy and aggressive species to a more peaceful and sustainable species might seem too unrealistic and utopian to offer any real hope. However, a profound transformation of this kind is what happens in the course of systematic inner work using holotropic states of various kinds. Our nature of our being is divine rather than bestial. So, perinatal sources of insatiable greed. When people confront the perinatal layer, especially the dynamic driving stage of birth that Grof calls BPM3, basic perinatal matrix 3, people can realize that their entire life strategy has been misdirected. Much of what they have been striving for has been strongly dictated by the unconscious emotions and driving energies that were imprinted in the psyche and body during birth. The memory of the frightening and highly uncomfortable situation stays alive in their system during delivery. It exerts a very powerful influence on us throughout our life, unless it is brought fully into consciousness and worked through in experiential self-exploration. Much of what we do in life and how we do it can be understood in terms of belated efforts to cope with this incomplete gestalt of birth and the fear of death associated with it. So when these memories are close to the surface, it causes feelings of dissatisfaction with our present situation. This discomfort is unspecific and amorphous because it's coming from our psyche, but it can be projected on a large spectrum of issues. We might attribute it to our unsatisfactory physical appearance or inadequate resources and lack of material possessions. We might feel that it's our low social status and lack of influence in the world, insufficient power and fame, inadequate knowledge or skills, any number of things. But the source of it is this, being suffocated in the birth canal in a very uncomfortable situation. The situation never seems satisfactory, and the solution always appears to lie in the future. We never live fully in the present, and our life feels like a preparation for something better to come, like the birth, essentially. Pursuing fantasized mirages of future happiness while not being able to fully enjoy what is available in the present. This misguided, inauthentic, and unrewarding approach to existence can be practiced throughout the entire lifetime until death brings the moment of truth and mercilessly reveals its emptiness and futility. When people are under the influence of BPM2, the no exit stage of birth, they also have feelings of suffering, but they don't feel there's anything they can do about it. So this doesn't lead to greed. They just feel hopeless. But in BPM3, you have a sense of light at the end of the tunnel, and you can affect the situation through your own actions. That's the feeling that you have. And people under the influence of these unhealed memories of birth and strong Pluto transits, Pluto's connected with BPM3, will get the urge to do something about it. And this leads to acquisitiveness, a desire to accumulate possessions or power, prestige, and so on. You might want to become president, though they shouldn't. Uh, Reckless, irrational pursuit of various grandiose goals is responsible for many problems in our world and results in much human suffering. Since this never brings true fulfillment, it does not make much difference whether the protagonist is a pauper or a billionaire in the category of Onassis or Howard Hughes. Once our basic survival needs are satisfied, the quality of our life experience has much more to do with our state of consciousness than with external circumstances. And I heard Stan, well, actually, he mentioned this to me once. How we feel is relatively independent of our external circumstances once we have food and shelter. But he said, it's relatively independent. I mean, if we're sitting on a hot stove, then obviously that is going to greatly affect how we feel. So this pattern is weakened by bringing into consciousness the memory of birth, confronting the fear of death, connecting with it, and experiencing psychospiritual rebirth. And then we can connect with the positive, good womb memories and postnatal situation, like memories of breastfeeding. Rather than the imprint of the birth struggle, we reduce the unrelenting preoccupation with future achievements and are able to draw much more satisfaction from the present. Now, the urge for transcendence. Okay, that was my last break, and we're almost done. This is part of a much longer slideshow I created on the cosmic game, which I'm sharing with people in my Grof studies classes. So hope you're enjoying it. Okay, let's see, share screen. Presenter view. Okay. So the urge for transcendence. For many religions, the recipe for dealing with the hardships of life is to play down the importance of the earthly plane and to focus on the transcendental realms. Some of these creeds recommend a shift in attention and emphasis from the material world to other realities. The religious systems with this orientation portray the material world as an inferior domain that is imperfect, impure, and conducive to suffering and misery. From their point of view, reality appears to be a valley of tears, an incarnate existence, a curse or a quagmire of death and rebirth. However, other spiritual orientations embrace nature and the material world as containing or embodying the divine. This would be more of a redemption of the feminine, of the material matter mother realm. I'm not going to read that, but some of the examples of that. So again, Stan's talking about these two forces of the evolution holotropic and involution hylotropic forces. Is there an approach to existence that can adequately cope with this situation, since neither separate existence in the incarnated realm nor undifferentiated unity is fully satisfactory? What is the alternative? Is it at all possible under these circumstances to find a solution, a life strategy that would address this paradox? Can we find an eye in the hurricane of these conflicting cosmic tendencies where we can rest in peace? Can we find satisfaction in a universe whose fabric is woven by forces that oppose each other? Clearly, the solution is not to reject embodied existence as inferior and worthless and try to escape from it. We have seen that experiential worlds, including the world of matter, represent not only an important and valuable, but absolutely necessary complement to the undifferentiated state of the creative principle. At the same time, our efforts to reach fulfillment and peace of mind will necessarily fail and possibly backfire if they involve only objects and goals in the material realm. Being too much in the world, as Don Henley wrote in his classic song, The End of the Innocents, I think. Any satisfactory solution will thus have to embrace both the earthly and the transcendental dimensions, both the world of forms and the formless. So this redemption of the feminine. The material universe as we know it offers countless possibilities for extraordinary adventures in consciousness. As embodied selves, we can witness the spectacle of the heavens with its billions of galaxies, breathtaking sunrises and sunsets, waxing and waning of the moon, or the wonder of the lunar and solar eclipses, but just don't stare at them without proper eyewear. We can watch fantastic displays of clouds, the gentle beauty of the rainbows, and the shimmering luster of the aurora borealis. Really get them strongly up here. I'm at about 50 degrees north latitude here in Alberta. On the surface of the earth, nature has created an endless variety of landscapes, from great oceans, rivers, and lakes to giant mountain ranges, silent deserts, and the cold beauty of the Arctic. Together with the astonishing variety of life forms in the animal and botanical kingdoms, these provide endless opportunities for unique experiences. Both as an observer and also in our sessions, we can identify with all of these life forms and objects and phenomena. Only in the and so this stands waxing eloquently about the redemption of the physical incarnation. Only in the physical form and on the material plane can we fall in love, enjoy the ecstasy of sex, have children, listen to Beethoven's music, or admire Rembrandt's paintings. Where else than on earth can we listen to the song of a nightingale or taste baked Alaska? We could add to our list the joy of sports, traveling, playing musical instruments, painting, and countless others. The material world offers infinite possibilities for research of the organic and inorganic realms, of the surface of the earth, of the depth of the ocean, and of the far reaches of cosmic space. The opportunities for the explorations of the micro and the macro world are virtually unlimited. In addition to the experiences of the present, there is also the adventure of probing the mysterious past, from the ancient civilizations and the antediluvian world to the events during the first microseconds of the Big Bang. Part of my dissertation was research that I did, the Mayan macro astrology. Stan Grof suggested this and had the first several correlations. And then I systematically look back at all the major archaeological milestones in human history for which we have accurate dating or fairly accurate dating, going back 100,000 years. You may find that interesting. If you let me know if you're interested. I'm on Facebook, Renn Butler. That's the easiest way to contact me, or rennbutler@shaw.ca is my email. I also did a whole other layer of macro astrology. I call the solar galactic astrology, which is based on the period of the Earth, of the solar system, this sun's rotation around the center of the galaxy. That's estimated by NASA at 230 million years. If that holds up, then there is a dramatic correlation between the multiples and divisors of that cycle and evolutionary milestones on Earth. You may enjoy that one too. That was published in Archive Journal, ARCHAI. Just type that into my name and it'll come right up. Lots of interesting pictures in there if you're interested in archaeology. No matter what we do, life will bring obstacles, challenges, painful experiences, and losses. When things get too difficult and devastating, however, we can call on the large cosmic perspective that we have discovered in our inner quest. The connection with higher realities and the liberating knowledge of anatta, the emptiness behind all forms, makes it possible to tolerate what might otherwise be unbearable. With the help of this transcendental awareness, we might be able to experience fully the entire spectrum of life, or the whole catastrophe, as Zorba the Greek called it. Jung, the forefather of transpersonal psychology, described in his writings a life strategy that addresses both the secular and the cosmic dimensions of ourselves and of existence. He suggested that we should complement our everyday activities in the external world by systematic self-exploration, by an inner search reaching into the deepest hidden recesses of our psyche, our individual and the collective psyche. By directing our attention inward, we can connect with the self, a higher aspect of our being, and benefit from its guidance. In this way, we can draw on the immense resources of the collective unconscious that contain the wisdom of ages. And then Stan writes, I have seen repeatedly that the pursuit of this strategy can lead to a more fulfilling, enjoyable, and creative way of life. It makes it possible to be fully in the world of everyday reality and yet be aware of the numinous dimensions of existence and of our own divine nature. The ability to reconcile and integrate these two aspects of life belongs to the loftiest aspirations of the mystical traditions, to be fully embodied in the material world, full incarnational embodiment, and yet transcendental awareness. This image from Buddhism of the lotus leaf, the lotus flower that sits pristinely above the water, yet its roots reach deep into the muddy bottom, fully in the world and yet open to the divine. He talks about the state of being inwardly drunk with the divine essence and yet outwardly sober. Similar breakthroughs have also occurred in many other disciplines, and I won't read all these, but Ervin Laszlo's unified interactive dynamics, and these other ones are a few salient examples. These new theories show increasing convergence and compatibility with the mystical worldview and with the findings of transpersonal psychology. They also provide a new opening for the ancient wisdom that materialistic science rejected and ridiculed. So the last several slides, spirituality is based on direct experiences of non-ordinary dimensions of reality and does not necessarily require a special place or an officially appointed person mediating contact with the divine. It involves a special kind of relationship between the individual and the cosmos and is, in its essence, a personal and private affair. The mystics base their convictions on experiential evidence. They do not need churches or temples. The context in which they experience the sacred dimensions of reality, including their own divinity, are their bodies and nature. And instead of officiating priests, they need a supportive group of fellow seekers or the guidance of a teacher who is more advanced on the inner journey than they are themselves. Supportive group of fellow seekers. This could be your friends who sit for you in your sessions. A male-female dyad is ideal sitting team. At the cradle of all great religions were visionary experiences of their founders, prophets, saints, and even ordinary followers. All major spiritual scriptures are based on direct personal revelations. Once religion becomes organized, however, it often completely loses the connection with its spiritual source and becomes a secular institution exploiting the human spiritual needs without satisfying them. I think Aldous Huxley talked about that. Instead, it creates a hierarchical system focusing on the pursuit of power, control, politics, money, possessions, and other secular concerns. And if somebody in our culture has a spiritual experience of the kind that inspired every major religion in the world, an average minister will very likely send him or her to a psychiatrist. It has happened on many occasions that people who had been brought to psychiatric facilities because of intense spiritual experiences were hospitalized, subjected to tranquilizing medication or even shock treatments, and received psychopathological diagnostic labels that stigmatized them for the rest of their lives. So thank God, Goddess, that we are now leaving behind that terrible era, and the psychedelic renaissance is proceeding, where the value of these, the meta healing value of these spiritual transcendent experiences will be more and more recognized. And at the cradle of all great religions were these spiritual experiences. I hope you found that interesting. It was a privilege to be able to talk with you. I'm sorry it has gone long, but this was the abridged version. Wishing you all a happy spring. And if you're interested in learning more about archetypal astrology, consider my class in the fall. You don't have to attend live. You can watch the recordings. Our two-part workshop in Greece, you can do one or both parts. This will be really interesting. I think it's going to be a very special rebirth moment. And our Grof studies classes as well. My colleague Mari Castle is offering some very interesting 4-week classes as well, which count for one elective credit as well toward ubiquity degrees. Namaste.